I thought I knew my mother. I thought, after 28 years of being her daughter, that I understood who she was, what she was capable of, and how much she loved me. But sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us the most deeply, in ways we never saw coming. This is the story of how my own mother sabotaged what should have been the happiest day of my life, and how I discovered a truth about our family that changed everything forever. My name is Sarah, and I'm about to tell you something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Something that happened just 6 months ago, on what was supposed to be my wedding day. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, if you've ever had your heart broken by family, then maybe you'll understand why I need to tell this story. And if you've never experienced anything like this, well, maybe my story will help you appreciate the people in your life who truly have your back. It started 3 months before my wedding. I was engaged to David, my college sweetheart, and we'd been planning this day for over a year. Nothing too fancy, just a small ceremony with about 60 people at a beautiful little venue outside of town. My mom, Linda, had been so supportive throughout the entire planning process. She helped me pick out my dress, she organized the flowers, she even insisted on paying for the catering because she said it was her gift to us as a couple. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have such an amazing mother, someone who wanted to make my day perfect. But then, about 3 months before the wedding, something started to feel off. Little things at first. My mom would make comments about how expensive everything was getting, how maybe we should scale back, how a smaller wedding might be more intimate. I brushed it off because, honestly, wedding planning is stressful, and I figured she was just feeling the pressure like everyone else. David and I had saved up for this day, and while we weren't going overboard, we wanted it to be special. We wanted to celebrate with the people we loved most. Then, about 2 months before the wedding, my mom started making really strange suggestions. She'd say things like, "You know, Sarah, maybe we should just invite immediate family. Keep it really small and intimate." Or, "Do you really need all of David's college friends there? You barely know some of them." At first, I thought she was just trying to help us save money, but there was something in her tone that made me uncomfortable. Something that felt less like helpful advice and more like she was trying to control who got to celebrate with us. I remember one particular conversation we had about 6 weeks before the wedding. We were sitting in her kitchen, going over the final guest list, and she kept making marks on the paper with her red pen. "Cross out the Johnsons," she'd say. "And do you really need to invite your cousin Mark? You haven't talked to him in ages." Every name she crossed out was someone from my side of the family or my group of friends. She never suggested removing anyone from David's family, which I thought was weird at the time, but I convinced myself she was just trying to be diplomatic. "Mom," I finally said, "this is our wedding. David and I want these people there. They're important to us." She looked up at me with this expression I'd never seen before. It was cold, almost calculating. "Sarah, honey," she said, "I'm just trying to help you have the perfect day. Sometimes less is more." But it didn't feel like help. It felt like manipulation. The real warning sign came about a month before the wedding. I was at work when I got a call from my best friend, Jessica. She sounded confused and a little hurt. "Sarah," she said, "I know you've been super busy with wedding planning, but I haven't gotten my invitation yet. Did you forget to send it, or did it get lost in the mail?" My heart stopped. Jessica was my maid of honor. Of course I'd sent her an invitation. I'd addressed it myself, put it in the pile with all the others, and given the whole stack to my mom to take to the post office. "That's weird," I told Jessica. "I definitely sent it. Let me check with my mom and see what happened." But even as I said it, I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. Something was very, very wrong. That night, I confronted my mom about Jessica's missing invitation. She looked genuinely surprised, which made me feel a little better. "Oh my goodness," she said. "I must have missed it somehow. I'll call the post office tomorrow and see if there was a problem with the delivery." She seemed so sincere, so concerned about fixing the mistake, that I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But then, over the next few days, more calls started coming in. My college roommate, Emma, my coworker, Rachel, my aunt, Susan, David's best friend, Mike. One by one, people who should have received invitations were calling to ask if they'd been forgotten. Each time, I'd check my list, confirm that I definitely intended to invite them, and then watch my mom's face as she expressed shock and promised to look into it. By the third week of these calls, I knew something was seriously wrong. Too many invitations had gone missing for this to be a coincidence or a post office error. But I still couldn't bring myself to believe that my own mother would deliberately sabotage my wedding invitations. It seemed too cruel, too calculated, too unlike the woman who had raised me. The truth came out in the most unexpected way. I was helping my mom clean out her closet the weekend before the wedding when I found them. A shoebox tucked away on the top shelf, behind some old photo albums. Inside were 43 wedding invitations. 43 invitations that should have been mailed weeks ago, addressed to some of the most important people in my life. My hands were shaking as I pulled them out, one by one, reading the names of people I'd been making excuses to for weeks. "Mom," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, can you come here, please?" She appeared in the doorway of her bedroom, took one look at the box in my hands, and her face went completely white. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she sat down heavily on the bed and started to cry. "I can explain," she said, but her voice was so small I could barely hear her. "I was just trying to protect you." Protect me? From what? From having the people I loved most celebrate the happiest day of my life with me? "Protect me from what, Mom?" I asked, and I could hear the anger creeping into my voice. "From having my friends at my wedding? From having my family there? What were you thinking?" What she told me next was something I never could have prepared for. Through tears, she explained that she'd been talking to David's mother, Margaret, for months about the wedding. Margaret had been expressing concerns about the cost, about how many people we were inviting, about whether we were being too extravagant. But more than that, Margaret had been planting seeds of doubt in my mom's mind about whether this wedding was really what David wanted. She told me, my mom said, still crying, that David had confided in her about feeling overwhelmed by all the planning. She said he'd mentioned that he would have preferred something much smaller, just immediate family. She said he was too polite to tell you because he didn't want to hurt your feelings, but that he was actually dreading having to perform in front of so many people. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. David had never said anything like that to me. In fact, he'd been just as excited about the wedding as I was. He'd been actively involved in planning every detail, from choosing the music to designing the invitations. The idea that he was secretly dreading our wedding day was absolutely absurd. "So Margaret suggested," my mom continued, "that maybe if fewer people could make it, David would be more comfortable. She said it would be better for everyone if the wedding was more intimate. She kept saying it was what David really wanted, even if he couldn't bring himself to tell you." "And you believed her?" I asked, incredulous. "You believed David's mother over your own daughter?" My mom looked up at me with red, puffy eyes. "She seemed so convincing, Sarah. And she knows David better than anyone. I thought I was helping both of you have the wedding you really wanted, not just the one you thought you were supposed to want." But there was more. As my mom kept talking, the full scope of what had happened became clear. It wasn't just that she'd hidden invitations to make the wedding smaller. Margaret had been orchestrating the whole thing, using my mom as an unwitting accomplice in a much larger scheme. You see, Margaret had never really approved of me. She thought I was too young for David, too impulsive, too different from what she'd envisioned for her son's future. She'd been polite to my face, but behind the scenes, she'd been working to undermine our relationship from the beginning. The wedding was just her final play. Margaret had convinced my mom that David was having second thoughts about the marriage itself. She told my mom that David had confided in her about feeling pressured to get married, that he wasn't sure he was ready for such a big commitment. She'd suggested that maybe, if the wedding was smaller and less of a big production, David would feel less trapped and more genuinely happy about the decision. She told me, my mom said, barely able to get the words out, that if we could just tone everything down, make it less of a spectacle, David might actually realize he was making the right choice. But if we went ahead with the big wedding, she was afraid he might call the whole thing off. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. My future mother-in-law had manipulated my own mother into sabotaging my wedding, using her love for me as a weapon against me. And my mom, in trying to protect me from heartbreak, had nearly guaranteed it. "Mom," I said finally, "did it ever occur to you to just ask me? To talk to David and me together about any of this? Instead of going behind our backs and making decisions about our own wedding, she looked at me with such pain in her eyes that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I was scared, Sarah. I was scared that if I brought it up, you'd get defensive and make a decision you'd regret. I thought if I could just quietly make the wedding smaller, everyone would be happier in the end. But we weren't happier. We were 3 days away from a wedding that half of our intended guests didn't even know was happening. I thought about Jessica, who had been planning to take time off work to help with last-minute preparations. I thought about my college friends who had been looking forward to reuniting for my wedding. I thought about my extended family members who had been saving up for travel expenses to be there for me. And then I thought about David, who had no idea that his mother had been scheming behind our backs, using my own mother as a pawn in her game. That night, I called David and told him everything. His reaction was exactly what I expected and exactly what I needed. He was furious, not at me or even at my mom, but at his mother for her manipulation and interference. He immediately called Margaret and confronted her about what she'd done. What happened next still gives me chills. Margaret didn't deny it. In fact, she doubled down, telling David that she'd been trying to save him from making a mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. She told him that I was too immature for marriage, that I was too focused on having a perfect wedding and not enough on being a good wife. She said she'd been trying to protect him from getting trapped in a marriage that wouldn't last. David's response was immediate and decisive. He told his mother that she was no longer welcome at our wedding. He told her that her behavior was unacceptable and that she owed both me and my mother an apology. When she refused to apologize and instead continued to insist that she'd been trying to help, David told her that she was no longer welcome in our lives at all. So there we were, 3 days before our wedding, with a guest list that was completely screwed up and a family crisis that threatened to overshadow what should have been the happiest day of our lives. I'll be honest with you, I considered calling the whole thing off. Not because I didn't want to marry David, but because the whole situation felt so tainted by Margaret's manipulation and my mom's betrayal. But David had a different idea. "Sarah," he said, "what if we use this as an opportunity to have the wedding we really want? What if we forget about trying to fix the guest list and just call everyone we care about, explain what happened, and invite them to celebrate with us anyway?" So that's what we did. We spent the next 2 days making phone calls, sending texts, and even posting on social media to let people know about the wedding. We explained that there had been a mix-up with the invitations, and that anyone who wanted to celebrate with us was welcome to come. We said it might be a little chaotic, that we couldn't guarantee enough food for everyone, but that love and laughter were more important than perfect planning. The response was overwhelming. People were so touched by our honesty and our willingness to include them, despite the chaos that many of them offered to help. Jessica organized a potluck so there would be enough food. My college friends chipped in to bring extra chairs. My Aunt Susan brought flowers from her garden. Instead of the formal, carefully planned wedding we'd originally envisioned, we ended up with something much more meaningful, a true celebration of community and love. But the most surprising response came from someone I never expected. The day before the wedding, my mom came to me with tears in her eyes and a confession that changed everything. "Sarah," she said, "I need to tell you something else. Something I should have told you a long time ago." She looked so serious, so scared, that I knew whatever she was about to say was going to be big. "When I was your age," she continued, "I was engaged to someone else, someone before your father. His name was Robert, and I loved him so much that I thought I couldn't breathe without him. But his mother hated me. She thought I wasn't good enough for her son, that I was too poor, too uneducated, too everything wrong for her precious boy." I had never heard this story before. My mom had always told me that my father was her first and only love, that they'd been high school sweethearts who knew from the beginning that they were meant to be together. "Robert's mother did everything she could to break us up," my mom said. "She convinced Robert that I was holding him back from his potential, that he could do better if he wasn't tied down to someone like me. She even went so far as to tell him that I was seeing someone else behind his back, which was a complete lie." "What happened?" I asked, though I was starting to understand why my mom had been so susceptible to Margaret's manipulation. "Robert believed her," my mom said simply. "He called off our engagement 2 weeks before the wedding. He said he needed time to think, to figure out what he really wanted. But I knew it was over. I knew his mother had won. The pain in my mom's voice was so raw, so immediate, that it was like she was reliving that heartbreak all over again. I was devastated, Sarah. I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never love anyone again the way I loved Robert. But you met Dad, I said softly. I met your father 2 years later, she agreed. And I did love him, Sarah. I loved him differently than I loved Robert, but I loved him truly. We had a good marriage, a happy life together. But I never forgot how it felt to have someone's mother destroy my happiness because she didn't think I was good enough. Now I understood. My mom hadn't just been trying to protect me from having a wedding that was too big or too stressful. She'd been trying to protect me from experiencing the same kind of heartbreak she'd endured. When Margaret started telling her that David was having doubts, it triggered all of her old fears and insecurities. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," my mom said, crying again. "I let my own past cloud my judgment. I let Margaret manipulate me because I was so terrified of watching you go through what I went through. I thought if I could just make the wedding smaller, less threatening to Margaret, maybe she'd accept you the way Robert's mother never accepted me." I hugged my mom then, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I understood her again. She hadn't betrayed me out of malice or control. She'd betrayed me out of love, out of a desperate desire to protect me from pain she knew all too well. "Mom," I said, "I'm not you, and David isn't Robert. David chose me, and he keeps choosing me, even when his mother tries to turn him against me. That's the difference." The next day, our wedding was everything we never planned and everything we actually wanted. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. People showed up in whatever clothes they had, brought whatever food they could contribute, and celebrated with us like we were all one big, slightly dysfunctional family. My mom walked me down the aisle, and I could see the pride and love in her eyes. She'd spent the morning helping me get ready, fixing my hair when it wouldn't cooperate, calming my nerves when I started to panic about whether we'd have enough chairs for everyone. She was my mom again, not the scared woman who'd been manipulated by Margaret's lies. David looked incredible standing at the altar, waiting for me with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. His father was there, looking a little uncomfortable, but trying to be supportive. Margaret was not there, and her absence felt like a relief rather than a loss. When the minister asked if anyone had any objections to our union, there was a moment of silence, and then my college friend Emma shouted out, "Yeah, I object to how long this is taking. Get these two married already." Everyone laughed, including David and me, and I knew that this was exactly the kind of wedding we were meant to have. But the story doesn't end there, because 3 months after our wedding, Margaret showed up at our door unannounced, wanting to apologize and be part of our lives again. She said she'd had time to think about her behavior, that she realized she'd been wrong to interfere in our relationship. She said she hoped we could start over, that she wanted to be the mother-in-law I deserved. David was skeptical, but he was also hopeful. Margaret was his mother, after all, and despite everything she'd done, he still loved her. We agreed to meet with her, to hear her out, to see if we could find a way to move forward as a family. What happened during that meeting was another revelation that I'm still processing. Margaret's apology seemed genuine at first. She acknowledged that she'd been wrong to manipulate my mother, wrong to try to sabotage our wedding, wrong to interfere in our relationship. She said she'd been acting out of fear of losing her son, but that she now understood that trying to control his life was the surest way to push him away. But then, as we kept talking, it became clear that Margaret's version of starting over involved me changing almost everything about myself to accommodate her vision of what David's wife should be. She wanted me to be more traditional, more focused on home and family, less career-oriented. She wanted us to move closer to her, so she could be more involved in our daily lives. She wanted us to have children soon so she could be a grandmother. None of these things were necessarily bad, but they weren't our choices. They were her choices for us, and she was presenting them as the price of her acceptance and approval. David saw right through it. "Mom," he said, "you're doing it again. You're trying to control our lives, just in a different way. Sarah doesn't need to change who she is to earn your approval. I married her exactly as she is, and I love her exactly as she is." Margaret's mask slipped then, and I saw the real her again. The woman who believed that love was conditional, that acceptance had to be earned, that she had the right to dictate the terms of other people's happiness. "David," she said, "I'm your mother. I only want what's best for you. If you can't see that Sarah is wrong for you, then I failed as a mother." "No, Mom," David replied. "You failed as a mother when you tried to sabotage the happiest day of my life. You failed when you manipulated Sarah's mother into betraying her own daughter. You failed when you chose control over love." That was the last time we spoke to Margaret. David made the painful decision to cut ties with her completely, and while I know it hurts him, I also know it was the right choice for our marriage and our future family. My mom, on the other hand, has become one of my strongest supporters. She learned from her mistake in a way that Margaret never could. She's been there for us through David's job change, through my promotion at work, through the good times and the challenging ones. She's proven that love means supporting someone's choices, not controlling them. And you know what? Our marriage is stronger because of everything we went through. We learned early on that we're a team, that we'll face challenges together, that we'll protect each other from people who try to come between us. We learned that love isn't just about the good times. It's about how you handle the bad times together. David and I have been married for 6 months now, and I can honestly say that I'm grateful for everything that happened, even the painful parts. Because all of it led us to this moment, to this life we're building together, to this love that's been tested and proven strong enough to survive anything. If you're dealing with family drama, if you're struggling with people who claim to love you but try to control you, if you're facing a situation where you have to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your happiness, I want you to know that you're not alone. Sometimes the people who are supposed to support us are the ones who hurt us most. Sometimes love looks like setting boundaries, even with family. Sometimes the right choice is the hardest choice. But I also want you to know that there are people in your life who will choose you, who will support you, who will celebrate your happiness instead of trying to control it. Hold on to those people. Treasure them. And don't let anyone convince you that you have to earn love by becoming someone you're not. My mom learned that lesson the hard way, but she learned it. Margaret never did. And that's the difference between love and control, between support and manipulation, between family and people who just happen to share your DNA. So here's what I want you to do. Think about the people in your life who truly support you, who celebrate your choices even when they don't fully understand them, who trust you to know what's best for your own life. Those are your people. Those are the ones who deserve your time, your energy, your love. And if you're planning a wedding or any major life event, remember that it's about you and the people you're celebrating with. Don't let anyone else's fears, insecurities, or need for control overshadow your joy. Your happiness is not something you have to justify or earn or compromise on. Life is too short to spend it trying to please people who will never be pleased. Life is too precious to waste on relationships that drain you instead of filling you up. Choose joy. Choose love. Choose the people who choose you. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you in some way, whether you're facing something similar or just need a reminder that you're stronger than you know. Take care of yourselves and remember that you deserve all the love and happiness in the world.